Good evening.
السلام عليكم.
How are you?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
Thank God. Okay. So we finished a chapter yesterday. We're going to Reish Yud Zayin today. Okay, this is an interesting chapter. So it says here in the tour, Hanichnas lechanuto shel bos basam. So what happened? He went into a store, it's like a flower store, all the herbs there and all stuff, that you can smell. So sheyesh bo mine besamim. He's got all kinds of besamim there. Mevarech borem mine besamim. So what do you bless? Borem mine besamim, right? Because it's a mixture of all kinds of things, So mine covers everything. And therefore that's what you bless, Because you got several varieties of things going on there. So says Bet Yosef, where does this come from? He says we already explained this in 216. This concept. So what did we say? Right? We mentioned this week already that if there's a mixture of two or more besamim together and they have a different bracha, so what you got to do is make mine besamim. Why is that? Because when it comes to besamim, we don't really know what's the majority, what's the minority, right? How can you really tell? It goes according to the potency of the thing, of the herbs. So since since that's the way it is, so therefore the rule is, that we bless mineh v'samim. Okay, great. So let's move on. So he says Yeshev Sham Kol Hayom Kulo. What else? Now here's the thing. He went into the store, right? So this thing has like all kinds of herbs there. Eno mevarech ela echad. So he says you bless one time, even though you're sitting there all day. Nichnas v'yotzeh mevarech al kol pam upam. But if he goes in and out, right? So you got to bless each time. This is what happens, right? When people are in a store, they keep going in and out all the time. So if you're doing that, you're going in and out. You gotta bless each time.
So it's saying bracha on the whole environment, not specific one?
Right, right, because it's full of besamim. So and you're enjoying it, for sure. So the thing is that we call it. You see from here. Apparently, we're gonna see more in the Shulchan Aruch, whatever. But apparently, right, the rule is like this: that even if you go out for a second, you still have to bless again. There's no time frame here going on. So why is that? Because it's like when a person eats shehakol, hadama, things like this, which is not a seudah. So even if you go out for a second, you have to bless again when you come back. So same thing also applies here for the fragrances. It's there's no time frame involved here. Every time you go out, it's a hefsek. It's an interruption. So you gotta bless again. Okay, great. In Israel, they have these kinds of stores like this in the shuk, right, where it's like all kinds of herbs, spices. You go in there, you get like a very strong whiff, of all kinds of smells. It's like, it's incredible. Uh, okay, but we did say, that you're only supposed to bless. We already mentioned this before. You're only supposed to bless if you intend to enjoy it. If that's not your intention, you're not mitkaven to enjoy it. So then there's no reason to bless for it. We mentioned that already. Okay, so here we're talking about lichora, somebody who like works there or something, he works there. So he does enjoy it, he likes it, so whatever, so you should bless. Why not? Okay, great. So let's move on. So he says, Maran, where is this coming from? Perek Eru Dvarim, right? In Nun Gimel Amud Aleph. That's where it comes from, which is in Brachot. Okay, so then he moves on. Mash katav Rabbeinu b'shem Rabbeinu Meir Rabbi Rothenburg. And then, right, said the Tur in the name of the Ram Mi Rothenburg. What does he say there? That the Dafka b'sh lo hayat dato lachazor. Oh, so right, the Ram says a little bit differently, right? When does he have to bless again? If he wasn't intending to come back. אבל אם היה דעתו לחזור, לא יברך, right? But if his intention was to come back, he shouldn't bless. דהה לא הסח דעתה, because he didn't divert his attention, right, his mind from that. כן כתב שם מרדכי. That's what the Mordechai also says, right? So there you see, right, that if he's intending to come back, he doesn't have to bless again. So it's not exactly like shehakol, things like this when you're eating, because there, even if you intend to come back, you have to bless again. So we see, right? It's not exactly the same thing. Okay, that's what it says. So let's see if the Shulchan Aruch paskins like that. Probably does, because he doesn't bring anybody else who argues with this. So let's see. So it says Shulchan Aruch like this: Hanichnas lechanuto shel basam, right? He goes into right bosem, whatever, basam. He goes into a spice store, right? Whatever, herb store. Sheyesh bo mineh besamim. There's besamim there, all kinds of stuff. The same thing also would apply, to a florist. Those flowers have nice smell, whatever. Same thing. Obviously, mevarech boreh mineh besamim. Right. So what's the blessing? Mineh besamim, right? Because there's a mixture of stuff going on there. Yashab sham kol hayom. If he sat there all day, eno mevarech ela echad. He only blesses one time. Nichnas v'yotze. So if he's coming in and out, mevarech al kol pam. He blesses each time. But if his intention was to return, right? Then he doesn't have to bless again. There you go, very simple. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. All these halachot are very important. Mhm. Okay. So it says the Torah, "En mevarchin al hareach ela im ken naseh lehareach." We only bless on the smell if it's made to smell. So says Bet Yosef regarding that, Pashut bepek elu dvarim sham, right? It's Pashut. Right, same Gemara there. Yeah, there's a lot of rules about this. We're going to see regarding what we bless on and what we don't bless on. Not everything that has a good smell we bless on. So then he says afterwards, Hilkach en mevarchin al besamim, right? Shel metim. Oh, so there you go, right? We don't bless on the besamim of the dead, right? So I don't know what they do today. I'm not, I'm not one of these right Chevra Kadisha guys. But anyway, right. In the old days, what they did was they would put like a scent, on the dead body. When it's in the when they're taking it out to bury it. And the reason was because the dead body has a bad stench. It rots, whatever. So in order to prevent the bad stench from coming out, emanating, that's why they put that the besamim there. So what does that mean, right? That this besamim is not coming to enjoy the smell. It's coming to prevent, an embarrassing situation, right? Where, the dead body has a stench. So therefore, it's not really called something which is coming to smell.
It's similar. How about air freshener for the bathroom?
Oh, right, exactly. Yeah, same thing, Asher. Same thing. Exactly. Right, all these air fresheners that we have, stuff like that, right? These things are not coming to smell. They're coming to prevent bad smell. That's what it is, right? So we don't bless on that stuff. Okay, great. Even though they smell really good, right? They smell fantastic, but that's not the point. That's not the point. Okay, so fantastic. Let's move on. So he says the Bet Yosef, right? Mishnah Sham Nun Aleph Amud Bet. It's a Mishnah there, right? Same place, Brachot, right? All these halachot come from Brachot, right? It's Pashut. So it says, right, Yerushalmi, right, and it's also in Yerushalmi brachot, shel metim hadat etema mishenetunin למעלה ממיתתו של מת, אבל נתונים למטה מברכין שאני אומר לכבוד החיים הם עשויים, וכתבו רבנו בסימן ריש צדיק זמן. So it's something interesting, right? So apparently, right, in those days, the good old days, right? There was two things there going on. One was that they would put the besamim on top of the dead body. And there was also another variation where it would go under the body. Okay, well, right. So he's telling you, right, Yerushalmi, you may have thought to say if it's on top, it's going to prevent the bad smell. If it's going on the bottom, right, maybe it's for the people who are attending the funeral. So you might think you should bless on that, right? So it comes to tell you, no, we don't bless on either way, right? Whether it's on the top or the bottom, it's all the same. That's what he's saying, right? Okay, fantastic. What can I tell you? I don't know what they do these days. At the morgue, I don't know. I don't, goodness. I don't know what's going on there. Kavra Kadisha. Okay, fantastic. So, מה שכתב שאין מברכים על בשמים, על בית הכיסא, then he says, right, as you said, right, that we don't bless on the besamim, which is in the bathroom, right, ושמן שעשוי להעביר הזוהמה. Also, when it comes to, right, the oil, which is coming to remove, right, the bad smell, right? So this would be like, but we have like deodorant stuff like this, deodorant, right? What are you gonna do? Bless on deodorant? I mean, that's not coming for good smell. That's not the purpose of it. You know that, right? I don't have to tell you. Okay, fantastic, right? So that's the idea. So we don't bless on any of these things, for the same purpose, for the same reason. So then comes the Beit Yosef and right gives the source. Gam ze bepek elu devarim, right? It's also there in the Gemara there. Nun gimul amud aleph. Okay, fantastic. So that's that. So let's see Shulchan Aruch. See Shulchan Aruch. It says Shulchan Aruch, en mevarachin al areach, ela im ken naseh alei ariach. As we said, right? You don't bless on it unless it's made for smelling. What does that mean for smelling? To enjoy the smell. Hilkach en mevarachin al besamim shel metim. So therefore, he says we don't do right on the one on the dead body, as we said, the corpse, and the tunim lemala me'amita, right, which is up above the bed. She'ena mela le'avir asichon ademet. So he says, right, that's only to remove the bad smell. Aval nitanim mata mebarchin. Shani omer. So he says, but he says the one which is on the bottom, we do bless, right? Like the Yerushalmi said. Right? We saw that in the Yerushalmi. Why? Because we say, right, that's coming for the funeral people there, right? Who came to the funeral. So וכן אין מברכים על הבשמים של בית הכיסא. So in other words, if it's on the bottom, we do bless, right? I don't think we have this concept today, as far as I know. I don't know. What can I tell you? Never heard of it, never saw it, never smelled it. I don't know. I think about it. Okay. So also in the bathroom, as we said, right? Same thing. The besamim over there. Right? Also like deodorant kind of stuff. We don't bless on those things. Okay, that's well, am I right? That's it. Okay, that's the idea. So we already spoke about this a little bit. We touched on it, right? About the perfume. Do we bless on that? We don't bless that on the perfume or cologne, whatever, right? All those things. So we said, right? There's a machloket about that. But the interesting thing is, that sometimes, if I'm not mistaken, right, especially in the old days, some women would put perfume because they wanted to remove the bad smell from their body. You know what I mean? Because they didn't really shower so often, like they do today, like almost every day, whatever. So in the old days it wasn't like that, so they would just do it to remove the bad smell on the body. So if that's the case, right, you don't bless on that, that's for sure. Same thing, right, as we just mentioned now. But if it's coming, for a good smell, to give a good smell, and so then apparently, according to Maran Ravad Shalom, you would bless on perfume. But the thing is, we're gonna see uh, as we go along here that you're not really supposed to bless when a woman is wearing perfume. You're not really supposed to bless on that. Especially a man, because it's a kind of like attraction kind of thing. Makes you attracted to her. So we're gonna talk about that as we go on.
I thought you could only bless on the actual perfume, not it when the perfume is coming from another object. Is that correct or no?
Yeah, so that's a good point you're making there. It's a good point. So yeah, the actual perfume has to be there, right? That's what you mean to say, right? Because otherwise, there's no makor.
Right, right. Isn't that the same for a person?
Right. So the thing is, that
Whether
it
man or woman?
it really depends, because if the perfume is still on her body or his body, whatever, right? It's still there.
Mhm.
No, but then later on it dries out, right?
Right,
So go figure, I don't know how to tell you. I don't know if it dried out, didn't dry out, right? So, the general rule would be that we wouldn't bless, if it's on the body because we don't really know what's going on.
right,
Yeah, I mean, you should avoid that.
right.
Also because of the other reason we mentioned, because of the attraction and all that stuff. Hirhurim, it's not really proper to do that. So, you stay away from that, whatever. Okay, great. So, let's move on a little bit. But if the perfume is in a bottle, that's a different story, right? Then it's a different story. But there are several poskim that they say you shouldn't bless on perfume in the bottle. There are opinions like that. Okay, whatever. It's a whole discussion there. We already spoke about it before. Okay, fine. So that's that. But I would say like this, that if let's say, you're making Havdalah and you don't have any other, thing to bless on except the perfume, you could use that, If you don't have any besamim, you could definitely get away with that. Yesh al ma lismoch. You have what to rely on, right? And you're gonna bless mineh besamim, right? Obviously. Okay, whatever. There's room to be lenient with that. Okay, fine. So let's move on. Then it says, yeah, we gotta go to Gimel. We're done with this. Let's go to Gimel. Okay, now we're going back to what we discussed before, right? Which is the incense. But before, we were talking about incense in the house. Now we're talking about incense which is in the clothing. So regarding that, says the Tur, Mugmar migamrim bo et hakelim en mevarachin alav. So he says, right, that in the old days this was a custom. They would, as we mentioned this story before, that they would smoke the incense and the clothing would absorb the smoke, and have a nice smell to it. So we don't bless on that. So we already said, right, why that is, because the makor, right, the source is not there. That's the reason why we don't bless on it. We already mentioned this before. Okay, fine. So that's that. So it says Bet Yosef Gam Ze Sham. It's also there in the Gemara there. Katav Rambam Peg Tet. Right? It says the Rambam V'chen Mariach Bekelim Shehen Mugmarim. So says the Rambam, right? Also, if a person smells the clothing, right, which has the incense, Eno mebarech, you don't bless. That's what he says also. The Katav Rabbeinu shelo hevin devarab. Oh, so says the Tur. I don't understand what he's talking about. Yesh li tmua al Rabbeinu. So he says he says I don't understand what Rabbeinu is talking about. The Tur, right? I don't understand what he's talking about. Katav b'siman shekodem says because he wrote. He says in the chapter before, Gabe kasharta o mashcha kavisha. Right? When we spoke about the olive oil, she'im sineno ashemen ve'en bo klum. We said there, right, that if you filtered the oil and there's nothing left in there, right, from the besamim, yesh omrim she'en mevarchin lav. Some say we don't bless on that, right? We already mentioned that there's a machloket between the Rambam and somebody else there. כלל, שאין ערבות זו ממנו אלא שקלט אותו בדבר אחר. Because he says it's not really, the source is not there, right? Just absorbed from some other place. הווה כריח שאין לו עיקר. So therefore it's considered to be like no source. ואין מברכים עליו, so he says we don't bless on that. כיוון שאינו מגופו של השמן, because it's not from the body of the oil. In other words, the actual fragrance is not there, It just absorbed from a different place, from a different herb. So he says this is the opinion of the Rambam, Mamash, right? So in other words, he's bringing the Tur in the last chapter. He brought the opinion of the Rambam, and over there he understood. So why doesn't he understand over here? That's his question. You understand? What happened over here? All of a sudden he lost his understanding. Why doesn't he understand over here? Okay, V'tamo shel Rambam. So now he explains, right, Bet Yosef. What is the reason of the Rambam? נראה שהוא משום דסובר, it seems like he holds דריח כיוון שאינו צורך הגוף כל כך כשאינו עיקר. Oh, so he says, he probably holds that since the smell is not really needed by the body, uh, when there is no source, even though he does get pleasure from it, he enjoys it, and lo levarech alav, he shouldn't bless on it. That's very interesting. That seems to be the reasoning of the Rambam. And we paskin like that, right? We do. So, it is what it is. Okay, let's go Shulchan Aruch, Gimel. So says the Shulchan Aruch, Mugmar shemegamrin bo et hakelim, right? So we're talking about, right, the incense that goes into the clothing, and we don't bless on that, right? There's no makor, there's no source. So he says it's not really, because you're not blessing the incense itself. It's just, there to give smell to the beged, right? To the clothing. So it's also the same thing he says if you're blessing, right? Sorry, if you're smelling clothing, right? Or some other things, whatever it may be, that they have the smell of the incense. We don't bless on that. Lefisha any car, because there's again, right? It's not the car. Ela reach belo ikar. So it's a smell which has no source. Interesting language. So let me just explain to you guys, right, what's going on here, because this seems to be like redundant, right? These two pieces here, Shulchan Aruch. What's the difference between the first one and the second one? You understand my question? It seems like it's the same thing, no? So if you look at the language carefully, it's not the same thing. Because in the first part, he's talking about the incense itself, which you're using, to put smell into the clothing. Even though the incense itself you don't bless. Because it's not coming to smell it, but rather to put the smell into the clothing. This is the reason of the first part. Second part is talking about where it's already absorbed into the clothing, right? So that you're not going to bless because it has no source. So it's two different reasons here for two different scenarios. You guys following me? You get the point?
Yes.
Okay, good. Are you speaking for everybody, Esther?
No.
Or just for yourself?
Just for myself. And if I don't do that, it always
Okay, okay.
to the
Okay,
video.
I think they agree with you. Okay, I think they agree with you. Right? Right? You know what they say, right? The Chazal, the rabbis, they say, "Hodak eshtikadame," right? When you're silent, that means you agree. Okay. Shtika kodadame. Okay, so all right, fantastic. So let's move on. That's what we call the silent majority, right? In American jargon. Okay. So let's go to Dalid. Yeah, this is also interesting piece over here. This is all interesting stuff and very practical. So So it says the tour like this. Besamim shel avodah zara, right? Beshel erva en ribrachin lavim. So he says, if it's besamim for avodah zara, right? So they still have this today, like in the church, they have this, fragrant stuff going on there, incense and stuff. We don't bless on that.
You said abosara, so it will be it's not a good thing to. It's against.
Yeah, like they have in the church, they burn incense there.
Yes.
That's what we're talking about. Things like this,
Okay. I get it.
So why can't you bless on that? Because you're not allowed to get benefit from avodah zarah, something like that. You're not allowed to enjoy that from avodah zarah. Something like that. Okay, we're gonna see the whole thing, right? And then also another one, which is erva, right? What does erva mean? It's like nakedness, whatever. We'll see exactly what the reason, what the idea is there. So we don't bless on those things. So he says, therefore, listen what he says. Interesting, right? Lefichach mesiba shel goyim, right? If you have a party, right, of goyim, we don't bless on the fragrances there. The stam mesibatan avodah zarah. Why? Because usually their party is for avodah zarah. Right? Today, I don't think it's that way, right? Today it's not like that, really. Most of the parties that they make today are for other purposes, right? For other sins, not for avodah zarah. They have also other sins that they do, right? Whatever. I'm not going to get into it too much. So, right, that's what it is. So today, I would say, it's not for avodah zarah. Yeah, what are they? Because the goyim today, they're not so religious like they used to be in the old days. They're very secular today. So unless you like going to a church, or some kind of a church function, something like that, right? You don't have to assume that, it's for Avodah Zarah. Today it's a little bit different. But in those days, these goyim were like very attached to Avodah Zarah, So everything they did was like, circled around that, was always, that was the center of the whole life. Okay, that's the thing. Okay, fine. So, אין מלכים לעבוד הסמים שלהם, דסתם מסיבתם, דמסיבה של גויים מפרק אלו דברים, בסימן ריש צדיק זין יתבאר, so he says it'll be explained in a different place, right? First of all, he says he brings a Gemara, right? Elu Devarim, which is in the Gemara, and he says we're going to explain it in chapter 297. Okay. בסייעתא דשמיא, right, God willing. Besamim shel erva hem divrei Rambam. Says, what about this issue of the nakedness, right? He says that comes in the Rambam. Katav Rabbeinu David Abu Rehem, this rabbi says that besamim shel erva hainu kegon kupa shel besamim. So what does that mean, right? Erva, nakedness, right? What is that all about? So he says what it means is that it's like a little box, of besamim tluya betzavara, and it's hanging on her neck. Or she's holding it with her hand, or her mouth. Right? That's the thing, as we said, right? When a woman has besamim on her body, you're not supposed to, bless on that, because, you may come to do something worse, right? It says, right, he may come to kiss her. Oh, kiruv basar, right? Or touch her, whatever, right? So you're not allowed to do these things, right? So what are we talking about? That's why it calls it erva. Why does it call it erva, by the way? You guys understand what erva means here? It's not really nakedness. That's not what it means. So what does erva mean? It has also another definition. So the definition of erva means it's a woman who's prohibited to you. You're not allowed to be with her, So if that's the case, you may come to kiss her, you may come to touch her. You can't touch her, can't kiss her. She's not allowed to you. That's what we're talking about. That's called erva. So therefore, you're not allowed to smell that, as opposed to, your wife, right? Who, she's allowed to you. So why can't you smell it? What's the problem? It's no problem, right? Apparently, right? It's not the same thing. There's also another thing that comes up, which is what about when she's nida, right? Are you allowed to smell the besamim on her then? Another question. Or maybe she's called erva, right? She is erva, she's not allowed to you at that time. But it's not exactly the same thing. You know why? Even though she's not allowed to you now, when she goes to the mikveh, she'll be allowed to, So therefore, it's not the same thing exactly. So that, requires some thought to see what we do with that. But anyway, right, let's put that aside now. That's called erva, that the woman is forbidden to you. So don't smell the perfume on her body. That's why, we recommend, to women, like because of this halakha, we recommend to them, don't put too much perfume when you go outside because, otherwise the men are going to be like smelling you, and it's not really proper that they should be smelling you in the street. I mean, these strangers, people don't even know who you are. It's not proper to do that. So therefore, we tell the woman, if you want to put perfume, put a little bit, don't put too much. Otherwise, the whole street is going to be stinking from your perfume. No, too much. Okay. So great. Let's move on. והרשב"א כתב בתשובה, it says the Rashba בתשובה, מה שכתב הרמב"ם, right? That which Rambam said, דאין מברכים על בשמים של ערווה, that we don't bless on בשמים, which is for ערווה, right, as we said. לא ידעתי מאין לו, so says the Rashba, I don't know where he gets this from. In other words, I don't know what the source is here. Aha. So in other words, apparently it's not in the Talmud. אוקיי, so let's see, לרב בז"ל, שלא ידעתי לו מקום באולי של ערווה ממש מפני שעשויים להעביר את הזוהמה. אין אמין שהן עשויים לעבירה להטיל ארץ של יצר. Oh. So he says, maybe, it's really talking about something else. So he's giving you here two examples of what it's talking about, right? So one, the last one, is saying that, it's for like sinful purposes. So what does that mean? This lady's like a prostitute or something. So it's going to be like a sinful thing here going on. This woman is like trying to seduce men. So, it's a problem. That's one way he says. In other words, he's trying to explain the Rambam in a way which it's understandable, how this works. In other words, how does this have any validity? This halakha. Then another thing he says, right, that is talking about erba mamash. So what does that mean? That maybe it means to say that it's just coming to take away the bad smell. That's another way he tries to explain it. That's very interesting. Oh, I see. Okay. I got what he's trying to say. Right? In other words, what he's trying to say is like maybe what erva means is that, a woman puts this like on her private parts, and there may be a bad smell there. So she's doing it to take away the bad smell. That's I already told you guys this right before. Some women put perfume, to take away the bad smell in their body. So that the Rashba is trying to say like that, right? If that's the case, then I understand why you can't smell that, right? Because it's not really coming for good smell; it's coming to take away bad smell. So he explains it two different ways. Very very clever the way he explains this. This rabbi was incredible. I'll tell you, what an incredible mind this guy had. Incredible. Okay. Let's go Shulchan Aruch. We got two Shulchan Aruchs here. Hey and Vav. Very interesting stuff. So it says Shulchan Aruch here. Maybe okay, whatever. Anyway, so let's see. It says like this: Besamim shel erva, right? As we said, if the besamim is for erva, right, which we saw, right, has several definitions. What that is. Kegon kupa shel besamim, right? Talui betzavara. For instance, one is, that she has, on her body, right, some perfume there. In those days, by the way, they didn't have like perfume like we have the liquid stuff that we have today. They had different types of things, whatever, but it was the same purpose, whatever, same idea. So, there's herbs hanging on like as a necklace, on her body, on her neck, whatever. Oh, chesed biada, right? Or she's holding in her hand, or befia, then rachin on him. So he reads it like the Rambam, same way. There's the Rambam. Shulchan Aruch. Lefi she'asur le'arich b'hem. You're not allowed to bless them, right? Why? Uh, you're not allowed to. I'm sorry. You're not even allowed to smell them. Why? Because you may come to kiss her or touch her, and this woman is forbidden to you, as we said. You're not allowed to do that. So there you go, right? So he doesn't really explain it like the Rashba, more like the Rambam. All right, very good. But the truth is, whatever the Rashba said is also halakha. All the things that he said were true. It's just that, he explains it like the Rambam here. Doesn't preclude the other explanation. Okay, whatever. Very interesting. Well, then if that's the case, right, that, what do you call it? If that's the case, that he paskins like the Rambam and not like the Rashba, so then the question comes back, right? The question of the Rashba, which is, what is the source of this halakha? The Rambam, the Rashba didn't know what the source was. That's very interesting. So that question lingers, I don't know what to tell you about that. Okay. Not really sure about that one. Let me just go back there 1 second to see, what was the source of the Rambam himself? I think he had no source. That's the thing. Yeah, it's a mystery. What can I tell you? I don't have any answer for you. Don't know what to say about that one. Maybe we should look at the Mishnah Berurah, to see what he says about that. Maybe he has something there, some tidbit for us, to explain a little bit this whole thing. Let's take a look. Oh, bombshell in the Mishnah Berurah. Here we go, right? So what does he say? Look at the end, right over here. It's Katav Besha, right? Beshata Beshema Birki Yosef, right? So he says, right, that they wrote in the name of the Chida, Birki Yosef, right? That what? That if his wife is in Nida, you're not allowed to bless on that. You're not allowed to bless to smell that either. So in other words, apparently the Chida right? Picks up on that. What I told you guys before, right? That when your wife is in Nida, she's erva. You're not allowed to be with her. So therefore, according to this opinion, that's also forbidden to smell the perfume on her when she's in Nida. But the truth is, I have to tell you one thing though. One thing though, that I'm not so 100% sure that this is the halacha. I'll tell you why. Because there is another halacha, which I just learned today, by the way, in the Rambam, in the laws of Isur Biyah, right over there, the forbidden relations. So the Rambam says there that when your wife is in Nida, he says you're allowed to look at her, and even enjoy the way she looks. So why is that? But she's erva, right? So Rambam says, yeah, but she's going to be permitted to you right next week when she goes to the mikveh, right? Whatever, right? So it's no problem. So if that's the case, maybe here also we say that, that you're allowed to smell a perfume on her. Okay, it's a question mark. But anyway, right, the Chida was a big chacham, so we'll take it now, we'll take it as it is. For now. Okay, what can I tell you? Very interesting. Hmm. I'm tempted, to look at the Yalkut Yosef on this. Maybe he wrote something on this. Okay. Anyway, let me just see what else we got here.
Rabbi, I don't think, did they say that a person with a Nida person is Erba?
Yeah, you're not allowed to be even if she's your wife, you're not allowed to be with her at that point. You know what I mean?
but you can look at her. So how
You can
is that
look at her, yes,
Erba?
you can look at her. Yes, 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 yes.
Okay,
Because she's going to be permitted to you, right, when she goes to the mikveh.
I see. Thank you.
I have to tell you guys, by the way, and it's a very important halakha to understand this. That on the one hand, as we said, right, it's not really a problem when your wife is in nida. You can be secluded with her, in the same room, and also you're allowed to look at her, as we said, right. There are certain things which are allowed because she's going to be permitted to. On the other hand, though, right, if you never lived with her yet, had relations with her yet, the night of the marriage, right, and let's say she became nida the night of the marriage. This happens all the time, by the way. She becomes a nida, before the wedding, even though they plan not to do it this way, but it comes out like that. Whatever it is, right? So anyway, right, the point is that we say there they cannot be secluded, when if this happens. So why is that? The reason is because they have never lived together yet, so the Yetzer Hara is going to be too big. So therefore, before you lived with her, you have to, you cannot seclude with her. So you sleep with the guys, she sleeps with the girls. That's what happens. Even though you're married, right? So it's interesting stuff. Okay, great. So what else we got here? So I'm tempted to look at the Yalkut Yosef. Maybe I'll take a quick look at it. Reish Yud Zayin. Let's see if we can find something. Hmm, let's see. Just take me a second. Hmm. For some reason, it's not coming up. I don't know why this is. Okay. Okay, I found it. First of all, I'll tell you guys something interesting, right? I found here in Yalkut Yosef. He says that, as we just mentioned, right? He talks about the perfume, right? So, as I said, right, according to Maran, Rabbi Shalom, you're allowed to bless on the perfume. He mentions that. And also another thing, which is the fragrant tobaccos, that they have. You're allowed to bless on that too. That's good to know. But on the other hand, he says, right, if it's like empty, it's just smell, In other words, there's no source there whatsoever, just empty vial, jar. There you cannot bless, right? Because there's no source. Very good point. Yeah, so he doesn't talk about the nida. What can I tell you? You know what? It may be in the laws of nida. I'm not going to get into it now. It's going to take too much time. Maybe he brings it down over there. But anyway, this is not the time for that now. We'll get into that some other time. It won't take too long. So I'll just try to move along here. Let's finish these halachot that we did, right? In the Beit Yosef. There's two more. So it says in Hey, Besamim shel akum, right? So Besamim of Avodah Zarah. Right? We don't bless on that. Because you're not allowed to, right, enjoy that, Avodah Zarah, right? The smell of Avodah Zarah. That's the reason why. So let me just look in the Mishnah Berurah here, see what he says. So Mishnah Berurah says, we don't bless on something which is forbidden, That's the whole thing. Makes sense. And then, so he also says, Mishnah Berurah, that what are we talking about? We're talking about where, it was made for Avodah Zarah. So, in other words, it was made for that purpose. Yeah, that's a good point. You know what he's saying over here. I'll explain to you why it's important to understand this. Because if you made something, right, a perfume, whatever, or incense, and your intention was that this should be for Avodah Zarah, so then you got a problem, because it was made for that. On the other hand, right, if it wasn't made for that, then even though they're intending to use it, at some later time for that purpose, it doesn't make it prohibited. It's not prohibited because it hasn't been used for Avodah Zarah and it wasn't made for Avodah Zarah. So therefore, there's no prohibition. So I think it's not a coincidence, right, that he doesn't bring up here this thing where we said, in the tour that the parties, right, those parties you can't bless, because I think nowadays the parties of the goyim are not really for Avodah Zarah, they're not really that crazy anymore, like they used to be. So it's not exactly the same thing. Okay, so we got one more Shulchan Aruch and we're done. So what does it say here? Mesiba shel akum in mebrachin al besamim shelem. Right, he does bring the parties over here. Stam mesibat akum, right? So he does bring it, but the thing is that I think in our times it's different though. Not exactly the same thing in our times. Let's see what Mishnah Berurah says here. Also, Yalkut Yosef doesn't bring it. the parties. כשמסובין לאכול ולשתות. Okay. So they're getting together, drink and eat. Today it's not avodah zarah, these things. They've got other sins that they do there. ודווקא במסיבה, אבל שלא במסיבה מותר לברך אבל סמים ואלכוהולים. So says, right, Mishnah Brura, that's only with their parties, he says. But when it comes to just, stam, like regular besamim of a goy, you're allowed to bless on that, because it's not for avodah zarah. So only at the parties, The truth is, today in the parties today, they don't make it for avodah zarah. But if it's one of those like, avodah zarah parties, like their holidays, right, whatever. So then it could be that's the problem. But right, there's no kinds of as we said, right? It's only if it was made for that purpose. Okay, whatever, or it was used for that purpose, right? Then then you got a problem. Okay, whatever. So I guess we'll stop here. Thanks for coming. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. Leila Tov, Chazak Baruch.
Yeah,
We'll see you, Bezrat Hashem, on Sunday.
Rabbi, if you want, I have the halacha in Torah Tahara.
Torah Tahara. Who wrote this book?
David Yosef.
Who wrote the Torah Tahara?
David Yosef.
I'm sorry?
Harav David Yosef.
Oh, what is it? That's on the laws of Nida, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. What does it say there?
נכון להיזהר מלרח בכוונה מריח בושם שאשתו נידה שחה על גופה.
Right. So he says,
Umiparakim.
Nachon Izaher. So in other words, he's
Right.
telling you it's not really prohibited, but it's proper to be stringent.
Right.
Okay, beautiful. Fantastic, Asher. Chazak Baruch.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
Shalom.
Talk to you.
All the best.
Shabbat Shalom. Talk to you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Very nice. I enjoyed.
God bless.
Thank you.